Love, at its core, is raw, unfiltered, and unbreakable. It doesn't care about fame, flaws, or the years that pass. It endures. What happens when two souls destined to be together fight against the world to make it work? Stay with us as we dive into 4 incredible love stories that transcend time, defy odds, and redefine what it means to truly love. Welcome to a journey through the untold depths of love. In today's video, we explore the remarkable stories of Johnny Cash and June Carter, Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, and Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. These legends didn't just fall in love. They fought for it. They faced obstacles, heartache, and life-altering challenges. Yet their love stories continue to inspire us today. So, sit back, relax, and let's explore these unforgettable tales of love that changed the world. It was 1961 when Johnny Cash first laid eyes on June Carter, a woman whose voice was as unforgettable as her grace. You can almost hear the soft strumming of an acoustic guitar, feel the warmth of the southern air, and see the humble stage of a country music venue where Johnny's path would intersect with hers. For Johnny, who had lived a life full of pain, loss, and rebellion, meeting June was like an unexpected ray of sunlight cutting through dark clouds. June, on the other hand, was already a force of nature in her own right, a talented singer and a member of the famous Carter family. Her musical roots ran deep, her voice rich with the history of country music. The first time Johnny and June shared the stage, it wasn't love at first sight, but there was something electric about the way their voices harmonized. The audience might have thought it was just a musical moment, but for you, watching from a distance, you can sense that something was quietly stirring between them, though neither of them knew it yet. Johnny, plagued by the turbulence of his career and personal life, was captivated by June's strength and poise, while she, always the composed performer, couldn't help but notice the raw vulnerability in his eyes. Her graceful composure contrasted with his rugged, untamed persona. Despite their undeniable connection, June was already married, and Johnny, with his troubled past of substance abuse and personal struggles, was hardly someone you'd imagine as her perfect match. But love, as it often does, works in mysterious ways. It would be years before their relationship would truly blossom into something more than just a stage partnership. Through their shared performances, late-night rehearsals, and casual conversations, the two began to understand each other on a deeper level. Johnny saw the kind of tenderness in June that he had always longed for, and June came to see the complexity of Johnny's soul, his passion for music, and his deep struggles. But there was one undeniable truth. They were drawn to each other in a way that neither had expected. In the background, Johnny's personal demons, including his addiction to pills, continued to haunt him, while June stood as a stabilizing force. Yet, their connection deepened with each passing year, with each song they shared, and each quiet moment between performances. Their love was not the loud, boisterous kind. It was tender, almost sacred, something that developed in the quiet spaces of their lives. As their lives intertwined more deeply, the world began to take notice of Johnny and June's special bond. But behind the scenes, their love story was anything but easy. There were obstacles at every turn. Johnny's continued struggles with addiction, his rocky past, and the weight of his own fame, June, although grounded in her love for music and her devotion to her family, faced the challenge of reconciling her affection for Johnny with her own sense of self-preservation. Johnny's addiction was a shadow that followed him, threatening to overtake the fragile foundation of his personal life. And it was in these moments, when Johnny was at his lowest, that June stepped forward, not as a savior, but as a steady, unwavering presence. She wasn't looking to fix him, but she loved him in a way that only someone who truly understood the depths of his soul could. She saw beyond his brokenness and recognized the man he was, the one who yearned to be better, to be more. Yet even with June's support, Johnny's demons weren't easy to conquer. There were times when their love seemed like it might slip through their fingers. The pressures of their careers, the emotional toll of addiction, and the distance that sometimes grew between them, it all threatened to drive a wedge between them. But June had something that Johnny needed more than anything: belief. She believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. During this period, they found themselves caught in a whirlwind of difficult choices, late-night conversations, and heartfelt decisions. The music they made together was infused with an emotional depth that reflected their personal struggles. Their most famous collaborations, like the song Jackson, was a playful and flirtatious exchange on the surface. But beneath the surface, it carried the weight of their unspoken emotions, their unyielding connection. It was as though their music became a way for them to communicate when words weren't enough. Johnny often found solace in June's laughter, her infectious joy that seemed to light up even the darkest of rooms. But the true test of their relationship came when Johnny made the decision to try and overcome his addiction. It wasn't an easy path. There were relapses, times when hope seemed lost, and moments when June questioned whether she could continue to stand by him. But through it all, she never gave up. She never left his side. June herself was no stranger to hardship. As a mother, a woman constantly in the public eye, and a performer, she carried her own burdens. Yet she wore them with grace, never revealing the full extent of the toll it took on her. She had her own struggles with self-doubt, with the pressures of living up to the legacy of the Carter family, and with the weight of being a woman in a male-dominated industry. But her relationship with Johnny was something that gave her a sense of purpose and strength. There were small moments that defined their love. The gentle touch of June's hand as she guided him through a tough day, the way Johnny would look at her with admiration and tenderness. These moments, though quiet, were the foundation of their deep connection. They were the glue that held them together. Despite the noise of the world around them, despite the turbulence of their personal lives, their bond continued to deepen. They began to recognize that they were meant for each other, not in the fairy tale sense, but in a way that transcended the imperfections of life. Their love was real, raw, and imperfect, and that was what made it beautiful. They weren't two perfect people coming together in perfect harmony. They were two flawed souls who found comfort and strength in each other. But there were still moments of doubt. Was their love enough to overcome the storms that life continued to throw at them? Could they truly find peace in the chaos? Johnny, always the rebel, never quite knew what the future would hold. But June had a way of calming his fears, making him believe that no matter what, they could face anything together. As they moved forward, Johnny's journey toward recovery was not an easy one. There were days when it seemed impossible, when the pull of addiction felt too strong. But June never wavered. She was there for him, not as a crutch, but as a constant reminder of what he was fighting for. Together, they slowly built the foundation for a future where they could be together without the shadow of addiction hanging over them. Years passed, and as with any love story that faces trials, Johnny and June found themselves standing on the other side of their most challenging moments. They had weathered storms that could have torn any lesser bond apart, yet their connection had only grown deeper, more resilient. Through the years of shared performances, countless quiet moments backstage, and the profound exchange of love that only those who have truly lived through hardship together could understand, Johnny and June were finally able to step into a new chapter, one filled with the peace they had both sought for so long. By this time, Johnny's personal struggles had begun to subside. His addiction was no longer the defining feature of his life, and it was clear that the support and love June had offered him were critical in this transformation. Still, they had moments of doubt. They had moments where the world outside of their small, shared world seemed far too overwhelming. Yet Johnny had learned to walk without the crutches of his former pain, and June had learned to trust in the strength of their bond, even on the darkest of days. Johnny often spoke about his love for June with a tenderness that matched the softness of his voice when he sang. His songs, filled with both vulnerability and strength, became a way for him to express the depths of his love for her. I Walk the Line, which had been about commitment, began to feel even more personal, as though he was walking a line not just for his fans or his career, but for June, for their future. He had once walked a line that led him toward darkness, but now he was walking a path that would take him, step by step, into the light. For June, watching Johnny transform before her eyes was both an emotional and a profound experience. She had always believed in him, truly, deeply believed. But even she, as steady and grounded as she was, couldn't have known how much her love could heal. Their relationship was not just about support in times of need. It was a partnership. They celebrated each other's victories, however small, and weathered each failure as a unit. Their relationship was not one defined by grand gestures, but by the quiet consistency of two people who simply knew, in the core of their beings, that they belonged together. One of the most poignant moments in their story occurred when Johnny, reflecting on his life and his love for June, shared his feelings in front of an audience. With June by his side, he performed songs that felt like heartfelt confessions, each note imbued with the weight of their shared history. It was as if every concert was not just a performance, but a celebration of the life they had built together, a life that had overcome so much. In the late years of their lives, as their health began to decline, their love only seemed to grow in depth. They were still the same couple who had stood together through hardships, yet now there was an added layer of comfort, a quiet certainty that regardless of what lay ahead, they had shared a lifetime of love that few would ever experience. Even as Johnny's health deteriorated, June was there, her presence as steady as ever, a reminder of the strength that love could provide. Johnny's death in 2003 marked the end of an era in music. But it also marked the end of a chapter in June's life. She never remarried, nor did she seek out any other man to fill the space Johnny had left. She had been married to him for 35 years, and his loss left a hole that nothing could fill. Yet, she carried on with grace, finding solace in their memories and the love they had shared. Her dedication to Johnny's memory was evident as she continued to perform the songs they had written together, keeping his spirit alive through music. Their love, though no longer in the flesh, remained eternal in the hearts of those who heard their story. The songs they made together were more than just music. They were the echoes of a love that had stood the test of time, the quiet, tender way in which they had supported each other, the way they had loved despite the obstacles that threatened to tear them apart, remains a timeless testament to what love can truly be. Johnny and June's love story is one that transcends the typical narrative of romance. It was not built on flawless beauty or fairy tale moments. It was built on hard work, sacrifice, and an enduring belief in one another. Their love was the kind that didn't need grand declarations to be felt. It was the kind of love that could be found in a simple look, a shared laugh, or the comfort of knowing that no matter how dark the world got, you would always have each other. Today, their story serves as a reminder of the power of love in its purest form. In a world that often seeks instant gratification and quick fixes, Johnny and June's love story is a testament to the enduring strength of true connection, a love that takes work, patience, and above all, belief in each other. Their legacy, carried on through their music, continues to inspire people to this day. It was in 1845 when Robert Browning, an aspiring poet of great promise, first sent a letter to Elizabeth Barrett, a woman whose poetry had already gained her a reputation in literary circles. The letter was not the beginning of their love story, but rather the spark that ignited something neither of them had anticipated. For Elizabeth, living in a somewhat reclusive world due to both her frail health and overbearing father, the letter from Robert was not just an act of admiration for her work, it was a recognition of her soul, a recognition of her spirit. You, sitting in the quiet space of a library, can almost feel the weight of that first letter. It was a gentle yet bold step, written with a sincerity that Robert had never shared with another poet. He was drawn to her poetry, but more importantly, to her, the woman whose words had such depth, whose struggles and triumphs spoke to his heart. In her verses, he found someone who understood the complexity of life and love in a way few others did. Elizabeth, though, was a woman living in a world of limitations. Her physical health was delicate, her world small, and confined within the walls of her father's house. This father, Edward Barrett, was a controlling and deeply protective man who had already isolated Elizabeth from the world, including any potential suitors. He believed that she was too fragile for marriage or the hardships of life. Yet, in Robert, Elizabeth found a kindred spirit who was not deterred by the walls around her. His letters, his words of admiration, became a window to a world she had only dreamed of, a world outside of her father's control, a world where love could flourish. Their correspondence began to deepen, and the connection between them grew stronger with each letter. You can almost hear the soft flutter of paper as Elizabeth, her hand trembling slightly, would write back to him. Each letter was not merely a response, but a small rebellion against the world her father had built around her. It was a quiet act of defiance, an acknowledgement that her heart was not bound by the limitations imposed upon her. Through their words, they found solace and understanding in one another. But despite the growing emotional intimacy, Elizabeth's health continued to be a major concern. She had been sick for much of her life, and her physical fragility made the idea of a romance difficult to imagine. Yet Robert's persistence was unwavering. He was captivated not just by her poetry, but by the very essence of who she was, the complexity of her soul, the depth of her mind. He saw beyond her illness, beyond the frailty that so often defined her existence. In him, Elizabeth found a love that was patient and unconditional, a love that saw her not as a delicate woman to be protected, but as an equal, a partner. As their correspondence continued, it became clear that the emotional intimacy between Robert and Elizabeth was evolving into something deeper, more profound. Letters turned into long, passionate exchanges that transcended mere intellectual admiration and transformed into a meeting of hearts. Yet, the physical separation between them remained. Elizabeth was still confined by her father's wishes and her health, while Robert, living in the freedom of London, could not easily reach her in her isolated home in Wimpole Street. In the face of these challenges, Robert did not retreat. Rather, his love for Elizabeth grew more persistent, more steadfast. He wrote her not just poetry, but letters filled with the promises of a future together, a life they could create despite all the obstacles. His words were like threads weaving through the distance that separated them, building a bridge between their worlds. Elizabeth, for all her delicate health, was no less committed to their growing bond. Her heart, once shadowed by doubt and the constraints of her father's control, was slowly opening to the possibility of love and life beyond the walls of her home. Yet her father was an impenetrable force. Edward Barrett was adamant that Elizabeth should not marry. He believed with conviction that marriage would ruin her health and lead to her death, a belief that weighed heavily on her, despite her own desires for independence and love. His dominance over her life created a tension, one that gnawed at Elizabeth's every thought. In secret, though, she began to fall more deeply in love with Robert, her affections growing through each letter. She confided in him, slowly, about her life under her father's roof. She revealed the extent of her physical ailments, the depression that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her, and the suffocating presence of her father. Robert, in turn, offered words of tenderness and hope, filling her life with dreams of what could be. But with every passing day, the challenge of living under the control of her father grew harder. Elizabeth's isolation was both literal and emotional, a chasm that seemed to widen with the depth of her love for Robert. Despite the comfort of his letters, there were still moments when she feared she might never have the freedom to be with him. Would their love remain a beautiful, unattainable dream? Would she ever escape the confines of her father's house, both physically and emotionally? One day, Elizabeth's health took a turn for the worse, and it seemed for a time as though she might never see Robert in person. The distance between them felt insurmountable. It was a time of great emotional turmoil for both. Robert, however, never faltered. He continued to write, continued to send his words of love and encouragement. In one such letter, he poured his heart into a message of hope, writing about a future where they could be together where her health would not be a barrier. His words were like balm to her wounded soul. And in that moment, Elizabeth knew that despite all that separated them, their connection was unwavering. However, even in their emotional closeness, there was the ever-present reality of her father's authority. Edward Barrett did not approve of Robert, and his attempts to maintain control over Elizabeth's life only grew stronger as she began to show signs of independence. The idea of defying her father, of following her heart to a man like Robert, was a frightening one. Yet the possibility of it grew more enticing with each passing day. It was in 1846, after months of secret letters, hidden conversations, and growing love, that Elizabeth made the decision to change the course of her life. She had long been torn between the safety of her father's protective control and the promise of a life that she could share with Robert. In a brave, unspoken act of defiance, she chose love. Elizabeth, in a quiet but determined act of rebellion, decided to marry Robert Browning, despite the consequences it might bring. She knew that her father would never approve of the union, but she could no longer deny the pull of her heart. Theirs was not a marriage born of convenience or expectation. It was a deep, passionate love that had grown through shared letters and unspoken understanding. The couple's elopement was an act of both courage and necessity. Robert, fully aware of the turmoil it would cause, waited patiently for Elizabeth to find the strength to break free from her father's grip. When they finally ran away to Italy in 1846, the moment was bittersweet. Elizabeth was leaving behind not just her father's house, but the life she had known, her family, her health, the very world that had once confined her. The months that followed in Italy were filled with both triumph and difficulty. Though Elizabeth's health never fully recovered, the decision to marry Robert gave her a sense of freedom she had never known before. The warmth of Italy, the beautiful landscapes, and the freedom from her father's control allowed Elizabeth to breathe more freely. Yet, her health continued to be precarious, and there were times when the toll of both her physical and emotional struggles felt overwhelming. Still, Robert stood by her, a constant source of love, patience, and unwavering support. In these quiet moments of their life together, the couple found solace in their shared love for poetry and art. Robert and Elizabeth wrote together, inspired by the beauty of their surroundings and the intimacy of their union. Their marriage was not without its challenges. Elizabeth's health, though improved, was always fragile, but their love for each other was steadfast. Through their shared words and mutual respect, they found a sense of fulfillment that had been lacking in their earlier lives. Elizabeth's health, however, continued to deteriorate over time, and as much as she wanted to live for Robert and for the love they had built, she knew her time was limited. Her health became an ever-present concern, and yet she and Robert made the most of every day. They traveled, they read, they wrote together, and through their shared moments, they built a legacy of love that would last far beyond their time. Her most famous work, Sonnets from the Portuguese, written during this time, was a testament to their love. The poems, rich with both sorrow and joy, encapsulated the emotions of a woman who had found deep love, but had also come to terms with the fleeting nature of her life. The sonnets, written with a raw vulnerability, became one of the most celebrated works of English literature. As Elizabeth's health began to fail more rapidly, Robert remained by her side, providing the same tenderness and unwavering devotion that had marked their entire relationship. Their love, once just a dream shared through letters, had grown into something real, tangible, and deep. They had faced every obstacle, distance, disapproval, and illness, and yet they had built a life together that was nothing short of extraordinary. Elizabeth died in 1861, a few years after their move to Italy, but her legacy lived on. Robert, heartbroken but grateful for the time they had shared, continued to write in her memory. He published her letters, her poems, and the sonnets that had been born out of their love. For Robert, Elizabeth's death was a great loss, but their shared life and love were more than enough to sustain him through the years that followed. He often spoke of her as his greatest inspiration and his deepest love. Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning's love story serves as a timeless reminder of the transformative power of love. It was not without its trials and hardships, but their relationship exemplifies how love can transcend even the most difficult of circumstances. Their marriage, though short-lived, was a beautiful testament to the courage to love boldly even in the face of societal constraints and personal struggles. Their legacy endures today in the poetry they created together and in the way they loved each other so deeply. It reminds us that love, when it is true and unshakable, can change the course of lives, build new worlds, and live on through the written word. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's love story began in a most unlikely way. It was 1836, and the young Victoria, who was not yet queen, was just a princess in a world that often felt distant and grand. Born into the royal family, she had always been isolated in the shadows of the palace, sheltered from the complexities of politics and power. However, the moment she met Albert, her cousin, at a royal gathering in 1836, her world began to shift in ways that would change history. You can imagine the scene. A young Victoria, still finding her place in the world, sitting in a lavish drawing room, surrounded by her family, when Albert enters the room. He is the son of the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a young man with a calm, measured demeanor, his eyes bright with intelligence and curiosity. He is different from other men Victoria had known. He carries himself with a quiet dignity, and there's a depth to him that captivates her. Their first meeting was brief, but there was something in the air that suggested that this was no ordinary encounter. For Victoria, the idea of marrying Prince Albert had never truly crossed her mind. She was, after all, the heir to the British throne, and the idea of a foreign prince from a lesser royal family marrying her seemed far-fetched. But Albert's qualities, his intelligence, his strength of character, and his warm presence left a lasting impression on her. What began as a faint spark in a royal gathering gradually grew into something far more meaningful as the two cousins continued to write to each other in the months that followed. The letters they exchanged were filled with the kinds of words you would expect from young, hopeful lovers, expressions of admiration, the beginning of trust, and a growing sense of connection. For Victoria, it was the first time she had met a man who made her feel truly seen, truly valued. There was a quiet strength in Albert's letters, and his intelligence captivated her. Albert, too, was drawn to Victoria's vivacity, her wit, and her earnestness. However, their growing affection was not without its challenges. For Victoria, who was just beginning to take on the responsibilities of her royal position, the idea of marrying someone outside of Britain's aristocracy was controversial. Her advisors were skeptical of Albert, viewing him as too foreign, too unknown, and beneath the grandeur of the British monarchy. It was a decision that would change the course of their lives forever. And yet, despite the hurdles, Victoria could not shake the feeling that Albert was the one she was meant to be with. In many ways, Albert was not the ideal match for a princess. He was not rich, nor was he an experienced diplomat, and he lacked the kind of royal lineage that might have made him an obvious choice for a queen. But for Victoria, his qualities of character and intellect were far more valuable than royal bloodlines. Their connection grew with each passing month as their correspondence became more intimate, filled with shared hopes and dreams. Victoria, ever the romantic at heart, began to envision a life with Albert, a life built on mutual respect, love, and partnership. She was drawn not only to his kindness, but also to his integrity, his commitment to supporting her as a partner in both life and royal duty. Despite the political obstacles, it was clear to Victoria that Albert was the man she wanted to spend her life with. In 1839, Victoria, just 20 years old, took a bold step, making a decision that would shape both her personal life and her reign. She proposed to Albert. In a letter to her uncle, she expressed her feelings openly, and Albert, equally captivated, agreed to marry her. Their engagement was not only a moment of personal joy for Victoria, but it also marked a new chapter in the history of the British monarchy. For once, love, not politics, was the driving force behind a royal marriage. Victoria and Albert's marriage, although one of deep love and affection, was not without its complexities. When they wed in 1840, the union was not just a personal one, but a political one as well. Albert, despite being Victoria's cousin, was still a foreign prince, German by birth, and many of her advisors were cautious about this. There was the ever-present fear that Albert might use his position as consort to gain power in Britain, a fear that often shadowed their early years together. The royal court was not an easy environment for a young, untested marriage to thrive, and the pressures of being queen were immense for Victoria, who was just beginning to learn how to balance both love and duty. For Victoria, who had spent much of her youth in the solitary world of the palace, Albert brought a fresh perspective, and she was fiercely determined to include him in her life. It was not enough for Victoria that Albert was just her husband. She needed him to be a partner in her reign, someone she could trust with the weight of the monarchy. And Albert, for all his qualities, was determined to play an active role, though his influence often created tension in the court. At first, the British public did not fully embrace Albert. They saw him as a foreigner, someone whose presence was both new and unsettling. As the consort of a queen, Albert's role was ambiguous. He was neither a monarch in his own right nor a traditional figurehead. However, Albert was not a man to shrink from challenges. Over time, he gradually became more involved in the administration of the royal household, taking charge of many aspects of the court's day-to-day activities. He was instrumental in organizing events and exhibitions that helped promote Britain's cultural and scientific progress. He also became a strong advocate for the arts and public education, establishing the foundations for what would become the Great Exhibition of 1851, a monumental event showcasing British industrial power. Victoria, meanwhile, was deeply invested in the emotional and practical aspects of their relationship. Albert was her rock, the person who steadied her during moments of doubt, and their partnership was the heart of her reign. Their letters to each other during their early years of marriage reflect their deep affection and mutual respect. In these letters, you can almost hear the calm, reassuring words that passed between them, words that spoke not just of love, but of their shared dreams for the monarchy and the country. For Victoria, Albert's companionship was not just a source of personal joy, it was a partnership that gave her the strength to rule. As time went on, their marriage became one of profound emotional intimacy. They had 9 children together, and their family life, though often overshadowed by royal duties, was filled with a sense of warmth and affection. Albert was a devoted father, and their children, though often in the spotlight, were raised with a strong sense of responsibility and love. It was clear to anyone who observed them that Albert and Victoria were not just monarch and consort. They were a team, a unit bound together by love, loyalty, and respect. Yet, despite the stability their love provided, Albert's role as consort continued to be fraught with challenges. His growing influence in the royal court was met with resistance from some quarters, and there were times when Victoria had to defend his position to her advisors and her family. But her defense of Albert was never just political. It was deeply personal. She loved him as a man, as the father of her children, and as her closest confidant. She never wavered in her loyalty to him, even when faced with opposition. The turning point in their relationship came in 1861 when Albert fell ill. It was a blow to both of them, and it shook Victoria to her core. Albert's health had always been delicate, but now it seemed as though the man who had been the constant source of strength in her life was slowly fading away. Victoria, now fully aware of just how integral Albert was to her happiness and well-being, became consumed with grief as she watched him suffer. Despite all her wealth and power, there was nothing that could be done to stop his decline. Albert's death in December 1861 marked the beginning of a long period of mourning for Victoria. Her grief was profound. She withdrew from public life for many years, a reflection of just how deeply she had relied on Albert's support. The Queen, who had ruled with confidence and strength, now found herself in the midst of a personal crisis, a crisis that would shape the remainder of her reign. She often wore black for the rest of her life, a symbol of her eternal mourning for the man she had loved so deeply. But even in her sorrow, Victoria carried on. She never remarried, choosing instead to honor Albert's memory by remaining faithful to the love they had shared. Her reign, which had been so strongly defined by their partnership, continued, though it was now overshadowed by the absence of Albert's guiding presence. Albert's legacy, however, lived on in many of the projects he had initiated during his life, from the Great Exhibition to the ongoing efforts to improve education and industrial progress in Britain. His influence on Victorian society, though often unseen, was undeniable. For Victoria, the love they had shared was a guiding force throughout the rest of her life. In her letters and speeches, she often spoke of Albert as if he were still by her side. Their love story, though marked by periods of challenge and heartache, remains one of the most enduring and poignant tales in royal history, a testament to the strength of love, loyalty, and partnership in the face of adversity. After Albert's death, Victoria's grief transformed the very nature of her reign. The vibrant, active monarch, who had once been a symbol of strength and progress, became a shadow of herself, locked in mourning for a man who had not only been her husband, but also her closest advisor, her partner, and the father of her children. His passing created an emotional void that was never truly filled. Yet, Victoria's deep connection to Albert and her memories of their love endured as the cornerstone of her life. In the years following Albert's death, Victoria continued to rule. Though the emotional toll was visible, she withdrew from the public eye, limiting her appearances and engagements, a stark contrast to the energetic queen she had once been. Her withdrawal was not just personal, it was political, as her absence from public life prompted debates about her ability to effectively govern without Albert by her side. For a time, it seemed as though the love between the queen and her consort had been so integral to her reign that its loss could diminish her capacity to lead. Despite these challenges, Victoria found solace in her children and in the legacy she and Albert had built together. Their 9 children, whom they had raised with devotion and care, continued to shape the British monarchy, as well as royal houses across Europe. Victoria's mourning was not just about the love she had lost, but also the future they had planned together, the institutions, the progress, the influence they had hoped to establish for future generations. Though Albert was gone, the work they had started lived on in their children, some of whom went on to play pivotal roles in the future of Europe. Victoria's deep love for Albert manifested in the ways she kept his memory alive. She surrounded herself with mementos of him, portraits, sculptures, and even the rooms in their home that were dedicated to him. She also continued to uphold the values and projects he had championed during his life, from the expansion of British industry to the promotion of cultural events like the Great Exhibition. These endeavors were woven into the fabric of her reign, creating a lasting tribute to Albert's vision for Britain and for the monarchy. One of the most enduring aspects of their love story was the way it transformed Victoria's understanding of the monarchy. Through Albert, she learned that a monarch's role could be more than symbolic. It could be one of deep personal involvement and partnership. Albert had not only been her husband, but also her partner in governance. His steady influence had guided her, helping her grow into the powerful queen she became. His intellectual prowess and diplomatic skill had shaped her reign, making her aware of the potential for monarchy to evolve into something more progressive, more connected to the people. This legacy influenced not only her own governance, but also the future of the British monarchy as it became more modern, more engaged with public concerns, and more focused on social progress. Victoria's enduring love for Albert also colored her personal relationships with other figures. She kept close ties with those who had known and worked with him, constantly seeking comfort in the shared memories of a time when the monarchy was unified in purpose and vision. These personal connections were important to her, as they helped her feel as though Albert's presence had not entirely left her world. His influence continued through the people he had worked with, and through these connections, Victoria was able to find some comfort in her grief. In her later years, as she grew older and began to experience the physical toll of age, Victoria's health also began to decline. Yet, through it all, she clung to the love she had shared with Albert, seeing it as a source of strength. Even in her moments of sorrow, she carried his memory with her, and it guided her in ways that were both comforting and painful. She was now a queen defined by her mourning, but also by the enduring love that had shaped the second half of her life. Victoria's reign ended in 1901 after more than 6 decades of leadership, and though much of her legacy had been shaped by the love she shared with Albert, her death marked the conclusion of an era in British history. As the world mourned her passing, there was a collective recognition that her love story with Albert had been not just a personal one, but one that had resonated deeply with the British people. Their story had transcended the walls of the palace, becoming a symbol of loyalty, devotion, and the enduring power of love in the face of political and personal challenges. Victoria's relationship with Albert is often seen as a model of the deep connection that can exist between two people, a connection that shapes not only their lives, but also the lives of those around them. Their love endured, even in death, as it became the foundation of a legacy that continued to shape British royalty for generations. It was a story not just of political power or royal duty, but of a personal bond that transcended all obstacles, one that, in its quiet, steadfast way, helped shape the monarchy and the history of Britain. In many ways, Victoria's love for Albert became part of the public consciousness, a love that was symbolized by the Queen's own commitment to his memory. Their love story is a testament to the transformative power of devotion and partnership. Their bond, once the foundation of a reign, became an enduring symbol of what it means to love someone wholly and truly, even when separated by death. It was 1922 when Frida Kahlo first met Diego Rivera, a man whose presence was larger than life, both literally and figuratively. Frida, at the time just a student in her early 20s, was already passionate about art, though her style was still developing. Diego, on the other hand, was a well-established and internationally renowned muralist, known for his bold political statements and immense talent. Their first meeting, which took place in Mexico City, was more than a mere introduction. It was the beginning of a passionate, tumultuous, and transformative love story. You can almost picture it. Frida, with her striking appearance, her strong eyebrows, and her vibrant, yet somewhat introverted personality, standing before Diego, whose larger-than-life presence filled any room. At first glance, Frida might have seemed the unlikely match for Diego. She was small in stature, and at that time, still finding her place in the world as an artist. Diego, with his commanding presence, was much older, already married once, and had a reputation for being a notorious womanizer. Yet, beneath the surface, there was something magnetic between them, something undeniable. Frida admired Diego not only for his talent, but for his revolutionary ideas and his unapologetic approach to art. She was drawn to his larger-than-life persona, the intensity of his work, and the way he expressed his deeply held beliefs through his art. Diego, too, was captivated by Frida's confidence, her unique beauty, and her raw, unfiltered personality. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, strong, independent, and deeply intelligent, with a fierce spirit that matched his own. Their first meeting sparked something between them that neither of them could ignore. Yet, their love story was not built on an instant connection, but on a slow, burning recognition of each other's talents and passions. Diego saw in Frida a kindred spirit, someone who understood the power of art and the struggle for political and personal expression. For Frida, Diego was both a mentor and an equal, someone who could guide her in the world of art, but who also saw her as a peer, someone whose work deserved to be taken seriously. Their relationship blossomed over time, with Frida boldly pursuing Diego, despite his complicated relationships with other women. But it wasn't just Frida's pursuit of Diego that made their connection unique. It was their shared vision, their mutual love for art, politics, and activism, and their complex understanding of one another. Despite their differences in age and experience, there was an undeniable attraction between them, one that defied the traditional conventions of love and art. Soon, they were inseparable, and it wasn't long before Diego proposed to Frida. The engagement, though short and passionate, was full of fire, just like their love. Their wedding in 1929 was a momentous event, but it was also an indication of the unconventional nature of their relationship. Their marriage was not the traditional fairy tale union. It was raw, intense, and far from perfect. Yet, for both Diego and Frida, it felt as though their worlds had collided in a way that made sense only to them. Frida's decision to marry Diego was, in many ways, a choice to step into a new world. For someone who had already suffered physically from a horrific accident that left her with lifelong health problems, Frida sought strength in Diego. He became her anchor, the person who would stand beside her as she navigated the pain of her physical ailments and the complexities of being a woman artist in a world dominated by men. Diego, in turn, found in Frida a sense of renewal, a young woman whose fierce spirit matched his own, and who, despite her fragility, never backed down from what she believed. Their marriage, though deeply rooted in passion and mutual respect, quickly proved to be anything but conventional. Diego and Frida were two fiercely independent spirits, and their love was not one of calm or quiet harmony. From the start, their relationship was marked by both intense affection and profound turmoil, a reflection of the way both artists approached life and love, with unrelenting intensity and a refusal to conform to societal expectations. Diego's infidelity was a constant source of tension between them. Despite his love for Frida, his passion for other women was equally undeniable. His notorious affairs, including one with Frida's sister, Christina, and later with other women, cast long shadows over their marriage. Yet, Frida, despite her own heartache, chose to remain with him. She loved him deeply, even as she suffered from his betrayals. Frida's own emotional and physical pain, stemming from her ongoing health issues, including her suffering from polio as a child and the after effects of a horrific bus accident in her youth, was compounded by the weight of Diego's infidelities. Yet, she did not simply withdraw. Instead, she channeled her pain into her art, using it as a way to explore the deepest parts of herself and her turbulent relationship with Diego. Her work during this time became a reflection of the struggles in her marriage, filled with raw emotion and vivid imagery. One of her most famous works, The Two Fridas, painted shortly after her divorce from Diego, is a powerful exploration of the emotional fractures that both defined and shaped her relationship with him. The painting shows two versions of Frida, sitting side by side, holding hands, their hearts exposed and connected by a single vein. One of the Fridas wears a traditional Mexican dress, while the other is in a European-style dress, symbolizing the divide between her identities, Mexican and European, and the pain of the broken relationship with Diego. The symbolism in this painting speaks to the internal conflict Frida faced, the woman who loved fiercely and was broken by it, yet who also found strength in the very same love. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Diego and Frida continued to find their way back to each other. Their bond was strengthened by the shared experiences of pain and creative expression. Diego, for all his flaws, was supportive of Frida's artistic endeavors, encouraging her to express herself in ways that were radically different from the expectations placed on women at the time. He recognized her genius, and it was through his support that Frida was able to find a space for her art to flourish, even as the personal turbulence between them escalated. In 1939, after a temporary separation due to Diego's infidelities and their individual emotional struggles, Frida and Diego reconciled. They remarried, though their relationship was never simple. Their love remained a complex, multifaceted thing, passionate, sometimes destructive, but always alive. Despite the ups and downs, they remained a creative force together. Diego, whose own works had increasingly aligned with political causes and the Mexican muralist movement, continued to play a significant role in the political landscape of Mexico and beyond. Frida, in contrast, became more introspective, using her personal pain as fuel for her deeply symbolic and intensely personal art. Their marriage, though marked by heartache, became a testament to the power of love to sustain even in the most difficult of circumstances. They saw each other not just as lovers, but as equals, bound by their shared love for art, politics, and culture. Frida, who had once sought Diego's approval, now stood confidently in her own right as an artist, no longer needing his validation to define her identity. But even as they reconciled, their relationship was never easy. Diego's affairs, his constant engagement with politics, and Frida's fragile health all continued to strain their bond. Yet, they understood one another in ways few others could. Their shared understanding of the world, the political struggles, the fight for individual expression, the complex roles of men and women in society, created a foundation that, while fractured, was strong enough to support them through their most difficult moments. Though their relationship was filled with complications, Frida never abandoned Diego, and Diego, despite his flaws, never stopped loving Frida. She was his muse, his confidant, and the love of his life. In his autobiography, he once wrote, "I paint myself because I am so often alone, and because I am the subject I know best." Yet it was clear that Frida, too, was the subject he knew best. Her spirit, her intensity, and her art became an indelible part of his work as well. The years after their remarriage were bittersweet. Frida and Diego remained inseparable in many ways, though their love story had already weathered so many storms that it could no longer be defined by the ideals of conventional romance. Their relationship had transcended the traditional, becoming something deeply intertwined with their identities as artists, activists, and individuals. It was both fragile and resilient, at times marked by immense pain, but also by a profound understanding of each other's struggles and passions. Frida's health continued to deteriorate, and her personal suffering was constant. She had undergone multiple surgeries throughout her life following the tragic bus accident in her youth, and the pain from these injuries, combined with her battle with chronic illness, was a daily struggle. Frida's ability to paint, despite her physical limitations, became a symbol of her unyielding spirit. Her art was both a way for her to process her pain and a method of self-expression, with each brushstroke serving as a cathartic release. During this period, Frida's health kept her in and out of hospitals, and Diego's presence, while constant, was not always enough to soothe her pain. Their relationship, although still full of love, was constantly tested by her declining health. Yet, in the face of this, they continued to support each other. Diego's devotion to Frida was evident in the way he cared for her, attended to her medical needs, and provided emotional comfort. But as much as they tried to find solace in each other, the weight of her illness continued to shadow their lives. Frida's health was not the only challenge they faced. As the years passed, both artists became increasingly involved in political movements that challenged their personal lives and professional careers. Diego, whose passion for political revolution had always been a driving force behind his work, became more politically outspoken. Frida, too, was deeply involved in political activism, aligning herself with causes that aimed to address issues of class, gender, and revolution. Despite the political differences that sometimes arose between them, they found common ground in their shared vision of a better world. And it was this shared idealism that continued to keep them connected. But even as they worked together to navigate the complexities of politics and art, Frida's health deteriorated further, and the world began to see the toll it had taken on her. Her once vibrant, colorful paintings were now infused with darker themes, reflecting the depths of her suffering. Yet, through this period of darkness, she continued to paint, continuing to create work that was more personal than ever before. Her most famous painting, The Broken Column, shows her body literally fractured in half, exposing a spine made of iron, while tears pour from her eyes. It is a painful and powerful symbol of her constant struggle with her physical condition, but also an example of her resilience, her ability to turn her suffering into art. Their final years together were marked by a sense of mutual respect and understanding. Although their relationship was no longer the passionate whirlwind it had once been, there was a deep, almost unspoken connection between them. They had both endured so much, personally, politically, and artistically, that their bond had evolved into something that was far beyond the intensity of their youth. It was a quiet, enduring love, one built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the understanding that their relationship, though flawed, was something that had shaped both of their lives and careers. In 1954, Frida's health took a turn for the worse, and her final days were filled with pain and isolation. Diego, though still deeply in love with her, was helpless in the face of her suffering. Frida passed away on July 13, 1954, at the age of 47, leaving behind a legacy of art that would continue to influence generations to come. Her death was a crushing blow to Diego, who had always seen her not only as his wife, but as his muse, his companion in both love and revolution. He once said, "I have painted my life, and I have lived my life like my paintings." And it was clear that Frida was the central figure in that life. After her death, Diego was consumed with grief. He never fully recovered from the loss of Frida, and her absence was felt in both his work and his personal life. Yet, in the years following her passing, Diego would continue to honor her memory, speaking about her with reverence and continuing to celebrate the woman who had inspired much of his art. Their love, despite its tumultuous nature, had shaped both of their careers, leaving an indelible mark on the world of art and politics. The love story of Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera remains one of the most iconic and complex relationships in the history of art. It was a love marked by passion, pain, and political fervor, an unconventional love that transcended the boundaries of traditional romance. Their story is a testament to the ways in which love and art are intertwined, and how deeply personal experiences can shape the world in which we live. Though their love was often fraught with heartache, it was also marked by an unwavering commitment to each other. Frida and Diego, through their art and their love, left a legacy that continues to resonate today. Their story is one of resilience, one in which both artists created art that not only spoke of their personal experiences, but also addressed universal themes of identity, pain, and the human condition. They showed the world that even in the most turbulent of relationships, there can be beauty, strength, and love. These stories remind us that love isn't perfect. It's messy, painful, and sometimes even heartbreaking. But it's also beautiful, transformative, and eternal. Johnny and June, Elizabeth and Robert, Victoria and Albert, Frida and Diego, each of these couples showed us the strength it takes to love deeply and truly. Which love story resonated most with you? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of love. Until next time, remember, love is what makes life worth living.